Welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update, hosted by the York Group of Downing Fry Realty. Our show will bring you the most up-to-date information on the local real estate market, presented by leading experts in the field.
Welcome to the Southwest Florida Real Estate Update. I'm Morgan York with the York Group of Downing Fry, and we're joined today by our host Jim York and his guest Chris Mitchell, owner of Brightway Insurance.
Thank you, Morgan, for the introduction. Well, Chris, thanks for coming on the show today. For our viewers that haven't seen you before, would you just tell them a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah, my name's Chris Mitchell. I'm an insurance agent with Brightway Insurance. Own an agency in Fort Myers and one in Naples as well. And we just primarily do personal lines insurance, home, auto, flood, those types of lines.
And our topics today is really about homeowners insurance because you don't do commercial, but let's talk about what's going on with the insurance industry in Florida because people are flocking down here and you know, rates are going up, right?
Yep. Yeah, rates are going up quite a bit. It's really primarily due to a couple things. But what we're seeing is the premium 25-30% with some carriers. With some, they've gone up 60-75%, and they just kind of keep trickling down. They're trying to do some things, which obviously we'll probably touch on later on, that are going to hopefully stem the tide of those increases. But that's really what's going on. It started about 18 months ago, and it's just kind of continuing on now, where you typically don't see rate changes until a few years after a hurricane. And Irma was the first one where they allowed you to file a claim for 3 years afterwards. And so because of that and because the amount of litigation that's in the state, that's really what's driving the premium. Kind of one amazing statistic is, you know, we have 8% of the population here in Florida in the United States, and 76% of the property lawsuits are in Florida.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Let's talk about people that, those are huge increases. Mm-hmm. So if a person can't afford those with their mortgage and everything, how are you handling that?
Well, you know, obviously you have to assess each individual and each individual situation. But as a general rule, what's happening is, you know, there's things you can do. You can certainly adjust coverages or adjust your deductibles, and there are some people that do that. You know, the banks escrow obviously is increasing, and for some people it's definitely creating a problem.
That's right.
I mean, we typically advise folks not to adjust coverages. However, you want to make them aware you can do it, but you don't necessarily want to say to do that because, you know, if something happens, then it's a lot. It costs them a lot more money than saving $300 or $400 a year.
Well, and the bank has minimums that they have to have certain coverages too.
Right. Depends on your flood zone also, and it also depends on the amount of the loan. Even though that's not directly correlated to what an insurance policy is for, a lot of lenders will tie that in, you know, to require you to have the amount for the loan. And
these increases, are they across the board, or with older homes, or you know, different areas, or like a brand new home? Is that going to be increasing too that somebody's purchased?
Yeah, it's across the board. Now, you know, with that, certainly in Florida specifically, the biggest driver of premium is the year built because of the codes we have.
That's right.
And over here on the West Coast, because Hurricane Andrew codes were implemented here in 2002. Because of that, if you have a newer home, your premiums are going up, but it's not anywhere near a home that you say find 20, 30 years old. It's just a much better option for new homes. And of course, there's a lot of new construction going on.
Right.
So.
And our next question maybe is, how are insurance companies writing policies? I think that's what we were talking about here before.
Yeah. Well, with all these lawsuits and with the amounts paid out, I mean, there's been around $30 billion between Irma and Michael. And they're still going on. There are tons of cases that are tied up in litigation right now, so it's going to continue on for a while. So you have a lot. Number one, in the last 3 weeks I should say, there are 3 different companies that have canceled over 50,000 policies midterm. They had to go to the state to approve that, and the primary reason for it is, you know, financial purposes. They essentially said, if we don't do this now, we might be in some financial trouble later. And this is to kind of avoid getting into that trouble. So you've got that. You've got a lot of companies have ceased writing any business at all, any new business. So they've completely stopped right now, just a moratorium on it. When they reopen, we don't know. There's some companies that stopped writing anything in Florida about a year ago, still haven't reopened. Carriers are being very, very restrictive on what they're doing. There are several carriers now that will not write a policy on a roof, regardless of its metal or its tile, if it's over 5 years old. That is because of all the litigation that's in there. So what it's doing is, it's a lot of times if you're a buyer and you're buying a home, you might think you have a 15-year-old tile roof where, 3 years ago, that's no problem. Every single company in the state would take that. Now you're limited to, who will take you.
And how does our viewers check on stability of an insurance company? What would be your take on that?
Well, there are a couple different ways you can do it. Most carriers here are not AM Best rated. So AM Best is one rating source. There's another called Demotech. AM Best, the handful that are AM Best A rated, you can certainly go to their site to see their financials, what kind of surplus they have, years in business. Those are the types of things you should take a look at. Demotech is the other one that you'll see all the carriers there, and the pieces you really want to look at are that, number one, the surplus. See how much surplus they have. It'll also tell you their amount of assets, and you want to you typically want to see a pretty large carrier with carrying quite a bit of surplus there, because that's where I think some of these carriers have gotten hurt. Their surplus was not enough, and what that means is if a hurricane hits,
they can't pay
individual
out,
right. When a hurricane hits, they'll file a claim under their reinsurance policy. But for other non-hurricane events and other things, they have to tap into that surplus, and that's really where they can get hit hard financially.
And did the flooding in Texas affect our rates too, or because at one time when we had a show, you talked about that it's worldwide, it can affect the rates too, right?
Yeah, reinsurance is shared across the globe to a certain perspective. So, a certain extent, I should say. I mean, in Florida, we are affected by things that occur outside of Florida, not as directly, but one of the reasons rates have gone up so much is because reinsurance rates have skyrocketed, because these larger carriers, that Lloyd's, et cetera, that cover insurance companies for hurricanes, they've dramatically reduced the amount they're going to cover, and then their premiums of the ones they will have increased dramatically. So that's why a lot of these carriers have to reduce their number of policies they have.
And what do you see going forward with rates? Or do you have any crystal ball on that or not?
Well, I mean, for now, they're probably going to continue to go up. Now, there was some legislation that was introduced to the Senate and the House. And the original legislation that was submitted had a lot of really good things in it. They obviously, as with any negotiation, they pulled some of those things out. Now that being said, the one that did pass, I believe it's still waiting for the governor's signature on it. But the one that passed still had a lot of good things that should hopefully attempt to stabilize the market. A few things they did, for example, they reduced the number of years you can file a claim after a hurricane from 3 to 2.
Right.
They're requiring attorneys and customers to notify the insurance company 10 days before filing a lawsuit, so they can, with the amount of the fees, with the amount of they're trying to recover, et cetera. So it gives it gives the insurance company a chance to address that. They addressed Citizens, who's our public insurer.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you next. What is going on with Citizens?
Well, as you might imagine, with all the market instability right now, they've taken on quite a bit of new policies, and that they were originally created as the insurer of last resort.
That's right.
But now there are a lot of really good risks, I should say, homes that are being funneled in there, and so they've allowed a couple things. They're trying to allow Citizens to have more actuarially sound rates, basically meaning they can take higher increases if they need to.
Right.
They need to be rated appropriately. Also, eligibility guidelines, because they don't. What happens with Citizens, and every time you write a policy with them, if you're a homeowner and you have a policy, there is a form you sign off on that actually tells you can be assessed above and beyond your policy premium in the event of a hurricane, because if one hits and there's enough damage, the entire public kind of pushes into that. So it's not something that they want to be out of control with regards to the number of policyholders.
And our last couple questions here is when people are shopping for insurance, I always recommend you. What should they really be looking for? Because it's so overwhelming
Yeah.
You know, what should they be looking for? And then the next thing is that, you know, with the rising cost of building supplies going on, you know, how can they be covered for that if, you know, that, you know, if they had a damage to the property, it would be covered fully, not just partially.
Yeah. Well, as far as the first question, what you should be looking for, I mean, number one, you want to look at the carrier quality. You know, certainly within A ratings, there are some that are stronger than others. There's some that have been around others, because that gives you, if you're with a company that's been around 40 years, they have an extensive track record of doing business here.
Right.
They're much more apt to maybe not fall into a situation where they have to, you know, non-renew tens of thousands of policies. And, you know, as far as if you're one of those customers who's hit really hard by a rate increase, you know, maybe you were at 2,000, maybe your renewal's 3,000 or 4,000, which that happens right now. So, you know, you really, there's a risk when you move from carrier to carrier to somewhat. So we're advising a lot of customers where perhaps, you know, because we write with about 50 home companies.
That's right.
And so we can shop extensively. And so we might find someone that's, hey, look, you can save $300-400 here. However, there's a risk that on the inspection, they might find something they have to repair. They might have an issue with your roof. So there's a lot of risk there.
Right.
So you really have to evaluate, okay, is it worth saving this for this risk?
Right.
And then the other piece is, you know, coverage. You want to make sure you've got the appropriate coverage on there. There's some things you can remove. You just have to know what you'd be removing. You know, as far as the costs of, you know, increased building costs you alluded to, yeah, I mean, you can see that now with one of the things the carriers always require you to do, you have to provide them with a replacement. You have to run a replacement cost estimator for reconstruction.
Yep.
They have adjusted those to where it's actually a good thing in that they are much more aligned with building costs now than they were.
Okay.
So, you know, that's something as an agent you're required to do. And so you want to make sure they have enough coverage in the event of a total loss like that, because that has changed quite a bit. And policies do include what's called inflation guard. So there is somewhat of an accounting there. So every year, 3 to 4% increase, which is good now. In a down market, it obviously is something that's not necessarily a beneficial coverage, but today's market, it absolutely is.
Well, I'm dog watching today, my daughter's dog. So could you talk about having insurance on pet policies too for our viewers before we end the show?
Yeah, absolutely. So Florida, actually, a few years ago, they did a study, and it actually was the highest average dog bite claim in the country, about 30,000. And, you know, if you have a dog, no matter, you know, what we get to a lot of folks is, my dog has never bitten anyone. It's never bitten anyone. Well, that's 99% of the time the dog's never bitten anyone.
Right.
You want to make sure you have coverage, because a lot of times that is not included in a policy. And your dog doesn't have to bite someone. It can cause someone to trip.
That's right.
You can go play with the dog that normally you get along with. It, you know, bites you at that point. It can run out into traffic. You wouldn't believe the things we see every day. And it costs you $50, $40 to add it to your policy. Yep. It's a no-brainer. You absolutely want to have it.
Well, Chris, thanks for coming on the show today. And thank you, viewers, for watching us today. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thinking of buying or selling a home in Naples, Marco Island, Bonita, or Estero, Florida? Think of the most experienced York Real Estate Group, associated with the #1 brokerage in Southwest Florida, Downing Fry Realty, which produces yearly real estate transactions of over $1 billion. Jim, Michael, and Morgan make up the York Real Estate Group of Downing Fry Realty, with over $275 million in sales transactions, along with offering over 25 combined years' experience in the local market. The Yorks can offer the experience and trust you need in a realtor. Call them today at 239-273-6727 or visit their website at www.naplesyorkrealestate.com.